Hi, I'm Izzy. This is my 2.3 reflection video over the the video and then the two readings. So starting off with the video, the TED Talk is called "Whoever Controls the Media, the Images, Controls the Culture." He starts off by showing like two pictures of LeBron James and then also Kendrick Lamar. And pretty much just gives us an example of how people can see the same image and then think two completely different things. So diving deeper more into that, people use media as a way to share experiences of our experiences to those around us. But at the same time, he thinks that we actually take this for granted. We take for granted the complex relationship that each one of us have with media. And then plus our life experiences and how those shape our reality. That timestamp was at 1:16, I think. So as people, we crave to share our experiences with those around us, and bond with each other over these experiences. We also want to use others to shape how we feel and how we are supposed to act. So kind of making that make more sense. I remember in the video, he used an example of how we might watch someone on the red carpet, someone climbing Mount Everest, someone fixing a toilet. And because of us watching that video, we think that if we were in that scenario, we would understand what to do. Which using media in that way is helpful, but it also does put a very bad distortion of reality. Media allows us to share these experiences, and then also like help us understand how to do things. But everyone uses media in this way, but the reason we're also different is due to the fact that we internalize and process the media differently. He talks about how everyone at his TED Talk is sitting in the room. So yes, everyone's physically together, but due to our perception from media and stuff, we're all fully in different worlds. Like, yes, everyone uses media, but we all internalize and process the media so differently. And then on top of that, companies will only show us what we want to see through their platform. Media now, comparing it to like 2016, 2017, media companies are shielding us from what we want to see. Media companies are shielding us from actual correct information to things that we just want to see, so that we continue to use their platform so they can keep making money, they can rack the shares up. So pretty much media does allow us to share info globally, but it really is limiting our worldview and only showing us what we want to see. It's really no longer a service of entertainment, but rather that like other incentives are taking over, with like ignorance and stuff. People are beginning to face blame on like specific social media platforms, when in reality, it's our own selves like diverting the guilt and blame of our bias, of what we're seeing and like the bias from it. So talking about the Talking Across Difference book, it immediately goes into about how important it is for journalists to carry the skill of talking across differences, and how you need to do it well, to have more accurate storytelling results, with a story that's deeper and more meaningful. It talks about how the craft of journalism can clarify or confuse the public. People with a big audience, whether this is like celebrities, public figures, even just like popular companies, often steer away from talking about big issues that could often result in controversy. Public figures or even just regular people often dodge the discussion of fear, with the fear of being fraught and misunderstanding. So this makes critical questions go unasked. So even if journalists were to give a fully unbiased story, the reader states that it is part of human nature that people like to distort info they receive, no matter how objectively it is presented. The idea that what we say, that what we can mean something, the idea that what we say can mean something different depending on who says it, hears it, and when it's said. So people like to just take things out of context, and, you know, someone can say something that may be controversial, but if you put it into context, then it's not as bad, because there are words that mean different things in different states. So, you know. So the book also talks about how when stakes are high, the possibility of misunderstanding is heightened. Professionals should hold back on labels. This was on page 33, due to labels probably not having the same meaning throughout the entire country. Going back to like talking about differences, it is important to have hard conversations with people who are willing to state their opinions. So talking across differences can help illuminate issues in a community and provide people with info they need to help understand the world. So like, let's talk about, let's say, I don't know. So like kind of like when people are explaining different opinions, and when they really listen to each other, that's when people share new ideas and new things are learned. When people are all stating their opinions and sitting down and actually listening to each other, the world and the conversation is way more clear for everyone, even if people don't always agree. So one of my questions I have over all of this material is that in the video, it mentions how whoever controls the media, the images, controls the culture. So how do you think this concept plays out in like current events or like social movements, in like real time, and literally like in real life? And how do journalists play into the public perception of these events? Another question I have is like, in what way can journalists create the movement of reinforcing existing bias and deepening division? Okay, sorry, my phone died. Another question I have is, the reading talks about how journalists should not only report controversy, but also explain why it's problematic. Do you think that journalists like almost have like a responsibility to provide context to things, or do you think that almost makes it worse? Should they hold back, or should they just like stick? So my last guiding question is, I think it was the reading talks about how things are depending on where, when, and who said it, things can be taken or seen at, looked at differently. So I had a question. It was like, let's say whether like a homophobic joke would be perceived differently depending on who states it. So like, do you think certain groups or individuals are given more leeway with their words? Whether this is like the gay community or any other community, like, do you think different communities are given more leeway, pretty much? So my last guiding question is, I think it was the reading talks about how things are depending on where, when, and who said it, things can be taken or seen at, looked at differently. So I had a question. It was like, let's say whether like a homophobic joke would be perceived differently depending on who states it. So like, do you think certain groups or individuals are given more leeway with their words? Whether this is like the gay community or any other community, like, do you think different communities are given more leeway, pretty much? And then my very last thing, taking all of these things I've learned and then applying them to like my future or like my world now, I think it's really important to talk about the hard topics. That's how you get solutions. If I do become a journalist in my future, I think it'll be important to not only try to be as unbiased as I can, but also get as much information about like a controversial or important event, so that my readers and my audience gets like the most unbiased and the biggest, clearest story that they possibly can.